Hello everyone, and welcome to week 6 of NMP 621, Introduction to Philanthropy and Fundraising Fundamentals. I apologize, first of all, if you hear a little bit of my seasonal allergies creeping through into my voice. It's an especially bad early summer for tree pollen, and I'm feeling the impact of that. I hope all of you are avoiding that. Anyway, here we are. We're in the home stretch here, the last 3 weeks of the class, and this week we are going to be discussing in particular the fundraising process and organizational readiness for fundraising. In other words, the nuts and bolts of a fundraising program. Last week you looked at the process for cultivating and engaging potential major donors via the 7-phase framework. So this is a little bit backwards, but nevertheless I thought it was important for you to understand some of the concepts behind segmenting and the profiles before we moved forward in terms of organizational readiness. Just a quick note in general about these recordings. The PowerPoints and the recordings are meant to highlight some of the important aspects of the assigned materials each week, but they should in no way substitute for your own careful reading of the assigned material. Just use that as a guide and a way to challenge yourself to dive a little deeper into the material. Okay, let's take a moment before we delve into the details of the mechanics or the nuts and bolts of fundraising, let's take a moment to just reflect a little bit on the philosophy that we've been talking about, the philosophy of fundraising, and the importance of language in that process. Take a look at this cartoon, which I find really sort of funny. Many people outside of the nonprofit sector might think about fundraising as depicted in this cartoon. In other words, that fundraisers are to be avoided, so avoided that you'd rather run towards a shark. In Chapter 4 of the Kim Klein text, she notes that it's not just important to use appropriate language with donors, but it's also how we ourselves think about our work as individuals. To try to stop thinking of development work as adversarial. In the talk by Jean Temple at Bay Path, I think one of the questions from the audience, the questioner used the phrase, I believe she said I have done my time. Which seems to be a very negative, again, that illustrates the use of negative language with regard to development work. She hasn't really done her time. She's really spent her time doing good work, important work, and Jean Temple answered her appropriately. So it's really important to position, to frame, if you will, the work in a positive context. So I want to reemphasize the philosophical approach to fundraising, which is presented not only in this particular text, but in this course in general. Above all, we want to express respect for the fundraising process, for donors, and for the individuals served by the nonprofit organization. When we do that, we don't make the ask, or we don't target donors, or you won't be moving donors along a continuum. Instead, the art of fundraising really is about inviting individuals into supporting worthy causes, or sharing the opportunity for individuals to support those worthy causes. We want to emphasize this because the program believes that it's very important how one talks about fundraising, and the language that we use is very important. Donors should never be made to feel that they would rather run towards that shark. As it was first articulated by Hank Rosso in his early work in the early 1970s, fundraising is values-based, and that's a very important concept. We are never just fundraising to fundraise. It might in the end serve the larger cause, it must serve the larger cause, rather, and the respect for all individuals in the process of raising those precious resources for the organization or for the cause. I believe we've talked about before that that philanthropy is inherently a moral-based action, and therefore we are working toward the common good, and that's why we need to treat it with respect. Kim Klein in Chapter 5 discusses the fundraising philosophy from an organizational perspective. How and where an organization gets its funding says something very important about its overall philosophy. She puts forward the philosophy of grassroots fundraising, which is an inclusive approach to engage as many people as possible to give donations of varying amounts. The organization should not be dependent on any one source. It's very important to have multiple sources for those resources. So think a little bit this week, if you will, about what is your own personal fundraising philosophy. Kim Klein has the exercise on pages 38 through 40 of her text, and I encourage you to use that exercise and think about the philosophy not only of the organization you currently work at, but your own personal philosophy. This is a process which is important for you, not necessarily if you see yourself as becoming a fundraising professional, but if you are going to be a leader in the nonprofit sector in any way, a CEO or an executive director of an organization, you really need to know what your own philosophy of fundraising and philanthropy is if you're going to be leading a development operation and a nonprofit organization. So let's talk a little bit about the process. We'll get down to those nuts and bolts. In the one of the two chapters that you have been assigned today, Fundraising Planning, this is a very comprehensive chapter that covers segmentation, marketing, branding, and how to set fundraising objectives. And it asks you at the end of the process to be able to answer these three questions with the fundraising planning document to be completed by the development office in collaboration with executives and with the board. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? It has been my experience in the fundraising process that more often than not the goals for a fundraising campaign or the fundraising department's annual goals come down from on high, the board usually, without any understanding of what it really takes to raise a dollar. So it's very important that you have communication with the staff who is actually on the ground and has a knowledge of what it takes. To have a larger perspective of the fundraising process is very important as you move forward as a future CEO or ED, so that you can be better armed with information and therefore be better able to manage the expectations of the board and the communication process between the board, senior management, and the development, the staff that works in your development program. Kim Klein, in her chapter, has a wonderful chapter on how to engage the board. Very good perspective on that process. So let's talk a little bit about the development of the case, making the case, as it were. The case is a much larger understanding, a larger perspective of why the mission of the nonprofit organization should be supported. Please remember from our readings and discussions that donors don't support organizations. Donors support the individuals or the causes that the nonprofit organization addresses. The case for support is encyclopedic, as described by Seiler and Aldrich, and the comprehensive formal case statement is usually quite thorough. For the most part, most donors will never read a comprehensive or encyclopedic document, but it is important that as fundraisers who are employed by the organization or volunteer fundraisers, that you are all rowing together, as it were, so that everyone has the same facts at their command and they have the same understanding of why the mission of this particular nonprofit organization should be supported. Now, the case statement is a particular expression of the larger case. Case statements come in a variety of forms, and they can be used both internally and externally. And they often include creative elements like the visuals that you see represented here. The case statement or the case expression can take the form of brochures or other printed material, speeches, printed fundraising materials. Take a look in the PDF, page 95, for the essential qualities of a case expression. That's the PDF in the handout this week. And it's very important that you do, because your assignment this week is that you are being asked to create a case expression for a real-life fundraising cause for an organization for which you either work or for which you are very familiar. So this week you also are taking a look at the Giving USA report for contributions in 2012. Here on the page you see the impressive percentage of these contributions given by individuals. Really take a moment to think about that. This is an impressive amount of philanthropy in our country last year, and almost 2/3 of it comes from individuals. And fundraising from individuals will be really is the focus of this particular course. 72%, that's quite a bit, and when you consider that you could theoretically add the 7% coming from bequests, which is really individual giving after the individual's death. And theoretically, you could also add a significant amount of the 15% coming from foundations, because most foundations, or a significantly large portion of foundations, are family foundations. So you could therefore say that close to 90% of all contributions in 2012 were the source of those contributions were, in one way or another, individuals, which is quite impressive, and one of the reasons to really know a little bit more about donor behavior and motivations and stewardship and donor relations. This is the chart which looks at philanthropy by the recipient organization. We've looked at this chart in a previous week. Take a look at these subsectors and see where the organization that you work for, or that you are close to, or the organization that you give to, see where it falls in this range of sectors. Again, to note that religion is still 32%, or the largest of these subsectors, but it seems to be shrinking. Compare the profiles that you were reading about in the 7 Faces, for example, and see where those profiles would fall on this chart in terms of where those individuals would be giving, where their philanthropy would be ending. It's also of interest to note that in 2012, and the 2013 figures should be available soon or by now, but in 2012 most recipient subsectors or types saw increases in 2012. The two exceptions, as I said, were religion, giving to religion, and giving to foundations. And those subsectors that saw the largest increases, which are arts and environment or animals, indicate that donors are returning to their personal giving priorities. So let's wind this up. A few reminders about the week, where there are 4 discussion questions this week, and please make sure that you respond to each discussion question by midnight on Tuesday. And your discussion responses should be about 250 words, and it should be clear from your response that you have completed the reading. And remember, if you're quoting something directly from one of our textbooks, you should include the author and the page number in APA format, just as you would if you were writing a research paper. And then you will be responding to at least 2 classmates in each discussion topic by midnight on Friday. This week's skill building assignment, as I said, asks you to evaluate a case statement, and then I would ask you to please put on your creative hat and really imagine a new expression of that case statement. And this assignment is due by midnight on Sunday night. Just as a general FYI, I do check email and Canvas regularly over the course of the week. I check it a little more irregularly on the weekends. So with this assignment, please look at it earlier in the week and ask your questions by Friday so that you don't reach the weekend and discover that I'm not immediately available to you. So good luck this week. As always, let me know if you have questions. I look forward to seeing these creative expressions of your case statement. And I hope you have fun with this assignment. This might prove to be an assignment that can be practically used in your current position or your current work life, or potentially for an organization that you might be in as a volunteer involved in a fundraising capacity. So good luck and have a great week.